AFTERBUZZ TV Network. Now the largest new media platform on the web and your #1 source for after-show entertainment. From the AFTERBUZZ Studios in Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and Bing.com, and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies, this is AFTERBUZZ TV's The Walking Dead After Show. We'll break down tonight's episode and get you all the latest news and gossip. If you'd like to buzz in on tonight's show, you can buzz us at 424-256-1729. That's 424-256-1729. And now, another post-game wrap-up show for your favorite TV show. It's AFTERBUZZ TV's The Walking Dead After Show.
Hey guys, what is happening? I am so excited for tonight's Walking Dead because, you know what, guys? Bing is for doing, and we are doing The Walking Dead AFTERBUZZ After Show. And joining me tonight, I'll start off with across the table, you've got the lovely Kristin Carole.
Hey guys.
And sitting next to me, Nando Velasquez.
Hey, how you doing?
And guys, I'm Dave Klein. In the booth, Stephen Lemieux. And you may have noticed if you're watching on the live chat or on YouTube, we have a very, very special guest with us here today. He has a little title, just a small one. The showrunner of The Walking Dead, Glen Mazzara.
Woo. Thank you. Thanks.
Hey. And there we've got a full studio audience here applauding. It's as you can tell. So I'm so excited to have you on, and man, what a crazy episode. I mean, I love the horror elements that you guys put into this one. This was one of, for me, the most intense episodes of the season.
I agree that the whole time, you know, my foot was shaking if you saw me, and just at the edge of my seat, just watching out for Andrea the whole entire episode.
I think I got a little ghetto during the episode. I think I actually screaed at the TV a couple of times. I haven't done that usually, but this one I believe I did. So
I heard you. I was like, Nando, cool it down a bit. But let's start off and talk about the intro. And I think this is the first time we've seen somewhat of a flashback in the intro in the entire series. Mm-hmm. And we actually had E. Bradley 127 from Twitter, and that's Erin Bradley, asking, how about the episode teaser? She knows that, Glenn, you're not a fan of flashbacks. What made you decide it was an appropriate means of telling the story in this instance as opposed to other times?
Good question. Hey, Erin, how are you? I'm glad you got your question in there. You know what? We wanted to show, what Andrea is thinking about when she finds out that, you know, Michonne's going to be tortured. Okay, we know Michonne doesn't talk a lot about who those guys are, who those pets are. We thought it would be great to bring them back. We always wanted to know what happened to them during the winter. You know, we sort of assumed the audience knows that they have a relationship, but we never really saw that relationship, you know, when they were camping out and all of that. So we wanted to go back and do that, and it was really just to kind of, you know, be the final straw. There's a lot of pressure on Andrea. You know, she went back after the powwow last week, I think, to sort of keep an eye on the governor, probably to try to kill him again or something. And when she sees this and she knows those chains and torture and that this is all about Michonne, she can't have that go on with her friends. So she, you know, finally is like, I have to kill the governor right here, right now.
Now, I was kind of thrown off, too, by the intro in the beginning because I really thought it was going to lead to Michonne being in that seat. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was why we were getting that introduction. I mean, as you were saying, that is what we were, you know, why we saw the chair afterwards and what you led us to believe. But it really set into my mind like, oh, no, this is going to happen to Michonne. So that really helped through the ending to make it even a bigger loop for me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. I love the transition at the end where Michonne goes, they weren't human to begin with, and it goes from one chain to the other to the governor. And that's another example of he's not really, you know, humane. But he's human, but he's not humane anymore. And even if he were to become the undead, it wouldn't be very, very good.
Well, not just that. Just anyone who's read the comic books, just the imagery of that last shot before the credits came in with the governor holding those two hoops, those two restraints, the way it is, without giving anything, of talking too much about the comic book. Anyone who's read the comic book, I think, that just sent a shiver down my spine, and I could imagine that's what you were going for with that shot.
It is. We're trying to say that, you know, this is what's going to happen to Michonne if Rick turns her over. You know, we've been very careful to develop that relationship. A couple of weeks ago, we had the episode Clear, which Rick and Michonne now bond. Immediately after that, we have Arrow on the doorpost, where now the governor is saying, "Great, give me Michonne." Now we know what's going to happen. Now the story cuts back to Rick, so that we'll see him wrestling with this decision. So it's, you know, the governor is becoming a sadist. He's becoming more and more of the governor we see from the comic book. But it was always my intention that we have to see that arced out. We didn't want to start him there because we just thought he would be an arch villain and people would just think he was one note. So you're seeing the transformation. And I think David Morrissey does a fantastic job.
Absolutely.
And I do enjoy that element. And being a comic reader, I know I've actually talked to people who only watch the show. And they've told me, and people have tweeted at me like, hey, I don't get that horrible sense from David Morrissey as the governor that everyone who's read the comics talk about. So you really did help lead that to make him more of a sympathizable and empathetic villain that you kind of can at first relate to a lot more.
Well, I'm glad you like it. Thanks.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about everything that he's doing and the fact that we get the Woodbury group, and after this, the first scene after the intro is gathering ammo up, and we have Milton now finding the governor's torture room and not approving, and we're finally seeing Milton bring out a stronger side, and we're finally having him speak up against the governor for the first time, and it was nice to see that, and we get his strength now, and we get him doing that.
And I liked also, we talked about it with Andrea, when she tries to get the governor to calm down, she always calls him Philip. And we saw Milton also calling the governor Philip at that exact point to kind of get him where he knew him earlier before he became this monster. So I really like that addition to detail.
Yeah, he's the only other person that I can recall that has called him by his first name.
Yeah,
on the show.
Just Andrea and him.
Right, and as he says, I knew him as Philip before he was the governor, which I think is also a strong line to present a difference between the two. It's almost like a character and a role that he has taken on, as opposed to who he really is. And he's just slowly taking on this role more and more and shifting sides. And we get him talking to Andrea, and after that, actually showing her this torture chamber and this torture room, and we almost see her shooting the governor, and things could have ended right there. And I bet, man, does she wish she had done that at this moment.
What a perfect opportunity as well. And Milton steered her away from that. Although he was right later on when he said to her, if you would have done that, you would have ended up getting shot as well, and then Martinez takes over, and then where are we at?
I don't think that instinct was his original thought, pulling the gun away, though.
But it makes sense.
It's a logical
later on, he can go back to it and go, this actually makes sense. Why I was afraid of you killing my old friend and possibly saving you as well. I thought he might have seen her, because at first I'm like, oh, he can't see her because his eye, he only has one, and it wasn't quite facing her at that moment. But then when he does sit down, his one good eye was facing the same direction that she was, and I thought maybe he would see it. But.
Can I jump in about this?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
So this was one of the most difficult scripts that I've ever worked on. Okay, I've been doing this now for a number of years. And this one was just a tough story because when we pitched out the season arc, we always knew that this was going to be an assassination attempt, and I wanted it to be a thriller, and so we always referred to it as the Valkyrie episode. And so somehow we were actually thinking, okay, Andrea's going to try to use a bomb to kill the governor or something like that. That's kind of, and we were tying it into the pits. You see the Screamer pits, and we were going to, and we had very, very numerous drafts of this script. We actually did have that figured out, and then when I went through and I was polishing the script and sort of tying it together, I wanted to ground it a little bit, and so then we had a version in which she's just walking up to him on the street and she's gonna try to shoot him there. We had different things, and it was really about we ended up with a scene that I think was very sort of intimate. It's just these three people on stage, and it was really I thought it worked, but this was an episode that had was a big linchpin in the whole season, and how to actually execute it. We did a lot of work to make it feel as real and as grounded and as kind of messy and as human as possible.
And I feel like with her as well in the vent, as opposed to you were saying an alternate version where it's just in the street with her doing an assassination attempt, it also gives her even more further motivation because she's there in the moment, which I think it was a good choice on your part. We actually have on the chat Rachel Steiner, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, saying Milton grew a pair in this episode. Thank goodness for that. And Liz agrees, saying I was hoping to like him and now I do. So we're getting a lot of people liking Milton after this episode. And I feel like, as we were talking about with him pulling the gun away, I think, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like his initial instinct was to save his friend, not necessarily like, is this a smart choice? I think it was, he's still worried this still is his friend.
Yeah, he loves the governor. He's loyal to the governor. That's his friend. He feels that this is a guy who's been broken by all that he's had to deal with, you know, by the loss of his daughter. He's finally dealing with that and everything. So yeah, I do think he cares about him. The other thing that has affected Milton was last week's episode, the fact that he had that conversation with Herschel, that he saw, you know, Daryl. You know, the governor's been very careful to position the people in the prison as the other, as terrorists, that kind of stuff. Well, now he's seeing them, he's talking to them, he's learning their people. And part of last week's episode was to show if the governor and Rick could just pull their act together, all of these people could live together. There's a life worth building here, and they could all get along. So the fact that they've been humanized to Milton is also affecting this.
I feel like, and I like that episode, and something that I've found was Andrea, the first two seasons, was a character I really disliked, and this was a season that I felt like kind of redeemed her, and I felt like this really, outside of being a story about Rick, I feel like this season is really Andrea's season, where we've seen a huge story arc and progression in her character. And I've liked seeing her point too last season last episode where she was really, as you said, and talking about the peace and the fact that they could live together if the two leaders worked things out. She was the one who really sees that at first and is trying to push that. And I think it's a good way to move that progression. And now that she sees that the governor is crazy, we get this scene with her trying to leave and trying to warn Rick's group, where she's trying to leave and Martinez catches her and tries to grab her weapons and gets her ammo and gets her weapons. And the governor comes and has a chat with her right after this scene and trying to, again, kind of lay her off the trail and pretend that everything's okay. And she's just finally not buying it. She's finally past that point. So we get her running into Tyreese and Sasha on her way out. And what a good group to run into. If you're going to run into anyone on the wall trying to sneak out, these are the right people to do. The people who aren't quite so initiated into Woodbury. And we see, and I think the strong scene for Tyreese is that he's not a killer. And that's what I gathered from this as he lets her go.
Well, and also she had a knife at him as well. He tried to keep her, and she had her little pocket knife and wanted to leave. And I liked his point later on. He goes, this isn't a prison, is it? Anybody can leave at any certain point. Why are you keeping these people in here? If she wants to go, like, let her go.
Well, he's such a smooth thinker, and they're also conflicted just because I think they see Andrea as a higher position in Woodbury, as someone like letting someone like from the royal family go or something like that. Like, they have to trust her up to a point. I mean, they still ended up telling everybody what happened, but I just love Tyreese. He's just such a cool, calm figure, and even with a knife to him, he's still very rational, which is something you don't see with many of the other characters out there this season in particular. So
yeah. And I think you know, the thing about Tyreese is he's retained his humanity. You know, when we know he's a good guy, the fact that he's in Woodbury, I think, is kind of interesting. You know, a lot of the comic book fans are wondering, why isn't he Rick's best friend in the prison? You know, again, we take our time to develop these characters, and you kind of split them off. Sometimes when you have a lot of characters in the prison, people don't get a lot of scenes. For example, it kind of becomes group scenes. You know what I mean? So if we had Tyreese in the prison, that means that Daryl's going to be in the background. So that's not something I want to do. You know,
I don't think Kristin wants that either.
Yeah. So it's like, and I don't want to have like a bromance triangle between those three guys right now while we're trying to get Tyreese up and running. So you put Tyreese, and he's with his group, and we see that there's even strife with, you know, Ben and Allen and everything. So you have, I think it's, you know, Chad Coleman from The Wire is playing Tyreese, and Sonequa Martin Green plays his sister Sasha. And I just love those characters. I just love them and just love what they bring to the Woodbury side of things.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so realistic, too, that they would end up there. That was, I know we had discussed that when all of a sudden we didn't see them, and that maybe there was a possibility that they would be there, because why not? It's so close. There's people walking around now.
Well, they got thrown out of the prison.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. They're not that far from it.
You know, that was something else, if I could say that. You know, one of the reasons with Andrea is, you know, her journey is she's trying to fit in. She has no place to go. So a couple of episodes ago, you see her go to the prison and she's not welcome. And she shows up at the prison and they, you know, frisk her and take a weapon. She goes back to Woodbury, same thing happens.
Yeah.
So she's really a woman without a world, and this episode is particularly nice because you see that human connection between her and Milton. You know, these are two lost souls. They have no place to go. It's kind of interesting how they have found each other in this hostile world.
Yeah, and I liked hearing what you were talking about just briefly before about why you chose not to put Tyreese in the prison. I think that's great to hear, and it's good to understand the perspective from you guys, how you make those choices. And as Nando said, Kristin probably appreciates the most because she
That you
loves
keep
Daryl.
Daryl in there.
Somewhere in the
Yeah.
mix.
He's a fan favorite. I'm not the only person out there
you're
who
not.
enjoys
I mean,
Daryl
he's great.
Dixon.
He reminds me of spaghetti western heroes, and being that I love spaghetti westerns, I love him too. Especially he had the poncho on at the
That was
beginning.
his idea. He
Was
like,
that his idea?
Yeah, Norman was like, I need a poncho. You know, so I'm like, what is he doing with the poncho? I'm like, fine, just it's good. It looks great or whatever. And we put him up on the bus in the first episode, and he just
Yeah.
loved that poncho. I was like, he's Clint Eastwood all the way. So.
If I ever get the chance, I'm stealing that now. Just if I ever get that opportunity, I'm wearing a poncho on camera. If I ever act in anything, just it automatically makes you that much more badass.
We wore it for our Halloween episode. He dressed up as Daryl in a
Oh, really?
poncho.
Yeah, that was my one opportunity.
Good.
But before we get into the Sasha and Tyreese and their development, I do want to mention, guys, that since we provide this show for free, we'd love your support in any way possible. Whether that be going to iTunes, go to YouTube, please rate, please comment, positive or negative. We just want to know how we can make this show better for you guys. Or you can join us on the live chat. That's 9 p.m. Pacific time, 12 in the a.m. on the Eastern time, pretty late there. But if you guys join us, we do try to incorporate you into the chat and into our discussion as much as possible. So please do join us. And as we jump back in, you told us before we started watching, Glenn, that you got the best studio note you had ever received in your entire career.
Yes.
What was that note?
In the Screamer Pit, when you find the burned walkers, one of the walkers actually had a penis, and we had to digitally erase the burnt penis.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that was what they said, like, please, burnt penis.
Please digitally erase the burnt penis.
All right.
No, yeah. I was like, what penis? We didn't even see it, but it's like, oh, there it is.
So Nicotero
had to erase it.
So
yeah.
Nicotero had a burnt penis in there? or-
Yeah, he just
kinda squeezed one in there?
One of the mannequins had a burnt penis. Yeah, it wasn't an actor. There was some mannequins underneath or whatever. So,
So in the DVD extended director's cut edition.
yes.
If you've ever wondered what a Walker penis looks like, all right. I feel like that's one of those things too, where like when someone catches, they're just like, oh no, this is something we have to take care of. Oh.
It was fine. It was a good note though. It was good.
So I guess I'm assuming that cluster then everyone had to be willing to be naked to do that scene.
No, I think it was some actors. You know, we see them moving, so some actors have the hero makeup on, and then I think some of the bodies underneath. And I guess there was his penis hanging out next to his actor, and I don't know, nobody caught it or something. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those things that eventually it gets caught. Luckily, it wasn't too late and it didn't go out to network and play tonight, and everyone's just like, wait a second.
Yeah.
What is that?
people would have seen it.
That was an amazing shot, though. I mean, good job by Nicotero on that. I felt like that looked so real to me.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
As Braying Dixon on the chat says, wow, burnt penis.
I believe
Burnt zombie
didn't
penis.
Norman read us? I follow him on Twitter. He had a picture once of him like pointing to like a naked zombie or something.
Yeah, I think
some
you
point on it.
retweeted that out.
I think I sent that to
Male
you
or
at
female?
work.
Male or female?
I think it was a male one, wasn't it?
Okay, because we have some naked female zombies too that are pretty good. So
Yeah.
I mean, Nicotero does an unbelievable job, and just his studio is actually in Chatsworth, and it's just incredible. You just walk through, and it's just all this amazing stuff that you can't believe. It's
Would you ever?
fantastic.
You haven't been a zombie yet on the show, have you?
No, I haven't
you
been.
be
I
one?
haven't. I was thinking about it, but I just never got the chance. So maybe we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, at this point with Greg Nicotero's career, it really shows how much he's excelled at doing this type of
Oh,
work.
he's the best.
So let's jump back on to talking about Tyreese and Sasha and their scene following kind of Andrea's initial quest to leave Woodbury is them going and telling the governor and admitting to the governor what's happened. And they make a strong choice here, which is where they decide not to admit to the governor and tell him all the details that Andrea laid out to them about how crazy she thought the governor was, so they can kind of still digest and decide and make a decision for themselves.
Well, and probably also hearing Andrea saying that the governor isn't who they think she is, they're probably thinking, just in case, let's not reveal anything to him, because if he finds out that she said that on top of it, he's going to go after her. They don't know if he's going to go after her anyways, but that's just going to put fuel to the fire, I would imagine, for him.
Oh, I just felt when he was spilling the beans to the governor. I mean, I think he spilled too much as it is. That
would have been even worse.
That would have been worse. But that was one of the scenes I think I was going ghetto. I was like, no, don't say anymore. Shut up. So
Well, it's more of an interrogation scene. I don't think they went. You have to imagine that somebody said, "Hey, did Andrea come through?" And Tyreese, being an honest guy, started, to give some information, and then the governor was like, okay, I want to find out exactly what happened. So he was probably, and the governor's pretty persuasive. He gets a lot of information out of people.
Yeah. I mean, immediately afterwards, we have the interrogation scene with Milton, where he's immediately come to the realization that, that it was Milton. He's able to read Milton like a book, and I'm assuming that's from being such good friends, too.
Well, Milton
Plus,
has
Milton's
a very
terrible liar.
bad
he's
poker
a
face.
bad. I mean, when he was talking to Andrea a couple of episodes ago, he just does not do well under pressure when it comes to trying to tell a lie.
Part of his charm, but it doesn't help very well.
So we have a comment from E. Bradley 127 on the chat saying that, back to the Tyreese scene, saying that she didn't feel like it was Tyreese making that choice. She felt like it was Sasha's bullshit meter going off and Tyreese starting to follow Sasha's lead. What would you take away, or how did you feel about that?
On the wall?
Well, back when it was Tyreese with the governor and Tyreese choosing not to tell the governor everything, E. Bradley felt like that was more the Tyreese reading off of Sasha not wanting to.
Maybe. I mean, he does follow Sasha's lead. That's kind of interesting. They could have played it that way. I mean, I was thinking, that could be there. That's an interpretation.
Yeah.
That's fair.
How
I don't know
often?
if I wrote it that way, but
Yeah.
I could see how you could say that. Yeah.
I mean, how often would you say, as far as something like that, the actors take their own interpretation and run with it, and then you just kind of get to observe the results?
I write that way.
Yeah.
Some of the writers like to really kind of script every moment for the actors. I sort of see the script as should be bare bones, should leave a lot of interpretation. I like the actors to ask questions, to give comments, and we talk it through. And then what we do before we start shooting, I have a tone meeting with all of the producers, the writer who's going to be on set, the director. At one point, I was actually thinking of recording this as like a podcast and releasing it after the episode. But and so we have maybe 48, 50-page scripts, and I talk for about 2 to 3 hours just about everything about that episode.
Yeah.
About what shots I want, what it feels like, the theme, just everything that we've put into that episode. And then I turn it over to the director, and then he or she takes it and they work with the actor. So I do a lot of prep, but then when they're shooting, I think I really want the director and the actors to have a process of discovery. They obviously call with questions. We have a lot of support on the set. But, we have a fantastic cast. We have fantastic directors. So I think it would be micromanaging on my part to say, say the line this way, or no, do you look this way, or that kind of stuff. You sort of want it.
So you're allowing them to do their job as an actor.
Yeah, you open it up. I mean, I think part of what I do as a showrunner is I'm supposed to provide a strong point of view, and deliver the scripts and everything, and then hopefully get out of people's way and let them do their best work and let them feel safe that they can do their best work, and then I get out of the way. And then, then you go into the editing, and this cast is so talented, they give you a lot of different choices. So then you go in with the editor, and we have great editors on the show. And this was edited, I think, by Julius Ramsey. And then, we work on the material and get it to where it needs to be.
Now, being that you're talking about thinking about doing a podcast, and real quick, a little off topic, we had a question from Rick Tatership on the chat asking if you'd be a commentator on the season 3 DVD. I don't know if it's too soon to decide that, but
I'm not sure if that's going to happen.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Okay, all right, great. Well,
but if not, maybe I'll come back here and we'll do it.
Hey, we would love to have you back. All right, so let's jump back onto the whole Tyreese scene, and he now ends up with Martinez, and kind of chatting with Martinez, and gets into a shuffle and a scrape with Allen. And this is where we once again see the disagreement between the two in the group, where it's Allen and Ben and Sasha and Tyreese, and they get into a scuffle because Allen really wants to be part of Woodbury. And as much as Tyreese wants to be, he kind of is looking at it with every point of view, whereas Allen just wants to be somewhere safe for a change and get away from everything. And we just get this scuffle here, as I said.
Well, it seems like there's obviously a lot more underlying from what happened in their past. There's enough there that you can try and piece things together. But we saw from when they were in the prison that Ben and Allen have a very different point of view than Tyreese and Sasha. And well, they lost Donna, I believe her name was, right? They lost Donna, so obviously they were a little bit more. What's the word I'm looking for? They're a little bit more frazzled just from losing one of their own. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. But yeah, it's just a crazy scene, and that's escalating more and more. I mean, that was a fisticuffs, and Tyreese almost did something very Tyreese-like. He put one of his own people that he's been with for a long time. Just a few lines before, he was saying how we've taken care of each other before. We'll do it again. And here he is now holding one of the very men he's shared his life with the past couple of months with over a zombie pit, over a biter pit. So I thought that was really, really, really interesting to see that.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and jump on that whole Walker Pit moment, which was a great moment because we'd seen before in the previous episode when when Woodbury comes and attacks the prison group, they have all these walkers and they unleash the Walker van, which was awesome. Really cool way to use walkers I wasn't expecting. We see now how they're doing this, and that they have this pit of walkers that they can corral for any sort of use, and specifically for a drop-off bombing of walkers. We see how they're doing that now, and Tyreese just does not approve at all. He is not cool with it. He's not okay with it, and he's shooting his mouth off, and Martinez just doesn't care, and it gives Tyreese and Sasha and the entire group a real chance to see what Woodbury's about and see Andrea's point of view. But once again, as we were discussing, Allen doesn't care because Allen's point of view is he just wants to be safe somewhere. So it doesn't matter what they have to do to get there, they just want to be safe. And that, to me, was one of the most intense moments, as you were talking about, where it was Tyreese holding Allen over the Walker pit. What a great shot. It was almost like the shot we talked about a couple weeks ago with Carole in front of the house as all the walkers are there. Just another really cool moment and shot of what it's like to be in this world.
I was slightly hoping he would just drop him in, but on the other hand, I could see why they don't do that.
Yeah.
But I'm not a big Allen fan.
I think it's also moral ground. It's just Tyreese has just shown a lot more morals, and in the prison, Ben was willing to. Was it Ben or Allen? I'm sorry, I always get the two confused because they seem to be paired together.
Allen's the dad, and Ben was the son.
So Allen wanted to do a little mutiny there when they felt that they could take over Carl and Axel and the women over there. And here it is over here. He's taking the easy ground pretty much, which is like, let's just do what these guys are doing. They're going to use zombies to kill people, even if they're kids. We're safe here.
Well, and he was willing, like you said, to do that while he was at the prison. This makes it easier. He doesn't have to do the killing. He just puts a bunch of zombies there to do it for him. He had no problem doing it face to face. So to have zombies do it, makes it a lot easier.
He just wants to take the easy ground, and Tyreese is thinking things through morally, and he still has that. He's still very humane in that sense.
Although, at one point, he did say, he goes, if you guys have a beef with Rick, that's one thing, but there's women and children there. So obviously, he's still a little shaken from the fact that a gun was, to his point of view, was being pointed at him to get out. But he liked everybody else. He goes, there's other people there besides Rick. If it's just Rick, I don't know what you want to do with him, but don't hurt the women and children. I thought that was an interesting take from Tyreese.
I think
that way.
something, speaking of women and children, and specifically children, that we're getting a lot in this episode, and specifically this entire season, is we're seeing all the parents really concerned with ways that they can protect their kids. And I feel like that's something we've seen throughout the entire season, where it was Lori and Rick worrying about Carl and then Judith. And then we've got, that's now a discussion point with Merle. And is it okay not to give up Michonne when that's a way to protect Merle's kids?
Or Herschel's kids.
Or, yeah, sorry, Herschel's kids.
Yeah.
Thank you. Merle.
Thank God Merle doesn't have any children.
Yes.
That we know of.
Yeah, thank you. So with Herschel's kids, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But Herschel's kids, and now we're getting Allen with his kid, and we get the governor. The only thing he's concerned about and driving him is crazy is his daughter being killed. So I feel like that's really a lot of what we're getting this season are ways, how do we protect our kids? And I mean, obviously, if Rick and the governor could come to an agreement, that would be the best way, but they're not. So I think that's really a lot of what we're seeing.
Well, I think people are concerned because, you know, all of these parents have the old world within them, and they have that old system and everything, and that stuff is receding. It's becoming crazier, you know. And we'll see, you know, with kids in this world, you see that they don't know any differently. So there are no rules. There is no, you know, there are no ethics, and so it's really up to the adults who are surviving to try to instill that, because, you know, it's really do or die in a lot of the situation. You know, can I go back to the Walker pits and stuff?
Yeah.
A couple of things is that material was written by Evan Riley, who's really, I think, just a fantastic writer, and it was interesting the way that he, you know, he really wanted to look at this opportunity to push in and show different things of Tyreese. So not only are we seeing Tyreese, you know, has retained his humanity and has a sense of morality, he also loses his cool. He's also crazy enough that he's holding a guy over a pit of walkers and threatening to drop him in. That's kind of surprising. You wouldn't expect that, you know? Also, those walker pits, think about how the larger arc of Woodbury has changed. When we first saw those pits, they were for entertainment, for the fights.
Yeah.
Now, as Woodbury is gearing up for war, as the people are, you know, starting to wear military gear and carry guns and stuff, you know, when we first met them, they kind of looked like a Gap ad, and everybody's walking around in shorts, and they were at a barbecue, and they were kind of goofy by design. And now they're you know, marching to war. So all of that has been kind of arced out, and we see how the governor made the switch to start to weaponize walkers. That's a big thing in this world now, that walkers can be weaponized.
Can I just say that between a couple episodes back, when you guys used the walkers at the prison and took down the fence, and then I not that it's kind of related.
Let me say, that was originally going to be in the finale.
Really?
And then I wanted to move it up. I just thought it was such that was the very first gag that I thought of for this season, because I was just like a truck of walkers, and the way that I thought of it was we were filming the farm burning last year, and it was freezing. It was 27 degrees. And so all of the walkers with makeup and everything had to stay down at base camp, and they would be bussed up to the set. And so all of a sudden, this school bus shows up, and these walkers start getting off. It's like 3 a.m., everybody's freezing, and these poor people get off, and they have, like, you know, very little clothes on, but all this makeup. And then we're told, okay, run toward the burning barn and that sort of stuff. We were filming that scene. But when I saw them stepping off the bus, I was like, okay, I got to put that in the show.
Oh, wow.
So that's where we came up with so before the season, I wrote a like sort of this document on what I wanted, you know, the season to be like. And one thing was, I don't know where we get it, but we've got to have a bus or a truck of because I've never seen that in a movie before.
That was great. But between that and in Clear, when you use the rats as zombie bait, I just think you guys are coming up with such original ideas that even for fans of the comic book are just like, wow, look at what they're doing. They're actually sitting down creatively and thinking, what else can we do with zombies?
That was Scott Gimple, who's going to be the showrunner, and he's just, you know, really a brilliant writer, and that was all him, you know.
Wow.
So I give him full credit for that one.
Yeah. It's definitely fun seeing the Walker bomb, as one of the commenters said. And Laura Jones on the chat commented, Team Prison has loads of walkers in their front yard that the governor kindly left them and that they've always had. Why don't they make their own Walker bomb? And I'd say they're not that depraved, but I mean, it is a fun point that they do have these.
It gets to be an arm race, but with walkers.
Maybe they will. We'll see.
Oh, okay. I was having a fun chat with someone on Twitter. I can't remember right now, and I'm sorry who it was, but they were joking about like walker catapults and other crazy ways to use walkers.
We've talked about it.
Did you talk about walker catapults?
Yeah, we've talked about it.
That is amazing. I'm excited to hear that.
We've also talked about if somebody had a plane or something.
We mentioned that a couple episodes ago.
Parachute in some parawalkers.
There's a lot of stuff.
Parawalkers.
Parawalkers.
Yeah.
Well, I also like how you guys do. This is going to sound a little morbid, but I find each episode you also find a different way to kill a walker. So I like the use of the different, today we saw the governor going around with the shovel in the head a few times, or even, Andrea taking the hook and killing it that way. They're definitely seeing weapons in places that you wouldn't always think of it that way.
That's a lot of the fun. I mean, we push each other as writers to come up with these ideas. We had the where Andrea tried to make her own pet a couple of weeks ago, and the curb stomp. Which was just brutal.
I watched the behind the scenes on that. They showed it at Paley Fest and how that went back and forth between that. I can't say actor because it was one of Greg's friends that was the zombie, right? I believe that they said it was. And then it went back to the model.
No,
they didn't actually stomp his head.
Wow, what commitment to the role.
So dangerous being Greg's friend.
But with this, because there's a certain amount of expectation that the fans have. They want to see zombies. They want to see zombies killed. But we have to keep that fresh, because if it's always the same thing, that's going to get boring. You know what I'm saying? So we really try to work closely with the other writers, the director, with this one, the production design, the stunts, Greg, everybody has a lot of different ideas, and it's kind of it's an incredibly collaborative process.
Now, speaking of walker deaths, Rachel Steiner on the chat commented that her dream is to be a walker extra on the show. Bonus points if she gets a crossbow bolt through the head from Daryl. It's obviously another. I don't know if that would be the experience I want from Daryl, but if that's what you want.
What kind of experience do you want, Dave? I'm just kidding.
Not the experience you want either. I'll go. Okay, not the experience you want. She got a hug from Norman Reedus a few weeks ago. I think it was the highlight of her life.
It was
life.
It was so unexpected that it took me obviously completely by surprise. So he was great. He was one of the nicest.
He's a good hugger. So,
he is. He is. I had a lot of people on the YouTube video were like, luckiest girl ever.
So from the chat, we've got a question, which is how did they get the walkers into the truck? And as soon as I find who asked that question, I will, or if someone on the chat could tell me. But they're wondering how they got the walkers into the truck, and I think we see sort of a crane sort of mechanism.
But the truck in the earlier episode?
Oh, for today, you mean?
Well, I would assume both episodes. I would assume.
Yeah, there's a crane. There's a winch. They pull the walkers out of the pit, and then they just kind of force them in. I mean, we've seen Martinez and Schumpert, the other guy. Those guys are pretty rough. We know they're capable of dealing with walkers, so they, I think, pull them out 2 or 3 at a time and just force them in.
Okay, and that was Scrub Hill 66 on the chat who asked that question. So thank you for the question. Make sure I call them out. So what we get then with the walker pit, and at the end of it, is someone has come and spread oil and burnt it all down. And I actually first thought it was some sort of feed. I didn't pick up right away that it was gasoline that they were using.
Feed?
Well, I was like, what is this? I thought it was like some weird blood or walker feed that they were using to feed the walkers. Because I don't know. They got to keep them fed somehow. And
they had that earlier in last season.
Right.
Before the fights, they were feeding them.
Or, at the beginning of
They were just
season
watering
3.
them like plants, I thought.
But I thought maybe it was something. And it turned out it was gasoline. We get a mysterious person coming and lighting them all on fire.
I definitely thought that was Milton, because I wouldn't have thought that they would be able to get this.
Here's the thing. He's such a terrible liar that last scene just, and the fact that they just hit it, it's an obvious choice. So I know you're not going to be giving us any clues.
I
But
don't need to tell you.
you know,
I thought it was, and I think he needs to leave with his duct tape suit right away.
You know
I
what?
don't think he's safe in Woodbury anymore.
I'm going to say that I think that they're trying to throw us off and that it actually was Tyreese and that they're actually good liars.
I'm gonna say it wasn't Tyreese. I'm gonna say
Even though they were so surprised by the gasoline, it really leads you to believe that it's Milton. But I just want to think that there's some sort of loop, and I'm just going to... That'll be my prediction.
Your loop, it could be Allen.
Whoa, that's
That'd be
real.
left field.
would be off the charts. There you go. Detective caps are on. I'm gonna go on. I'm gonna say it's Martinez. I'm gonna say he had an ulterior motive. I have no idea what the motive is as of yet, but I'm gonna say it can't be Milton and it can't be Tyreese. It's got to be someone else we're familiar with. So I'm gonna say that, and I know I'm gonna fail miserably when I find out the truth, but I'm still gonna go out on a limb.
So, Rictatorship agrees with you, thinks that it was a trick and Martinez did it. There's no way Milton did it, agrees that it was some sort of setup. And then Pat on the chat agrees with Kristin that and this is the general thought that Milton just has a terrible poker face, and it was Milton. So it's kind of some disagreement there. So I'll be curious to see what ends up being.
We'll see what happens.
I'm going to pull out
I will
Noah.
say you'll find out. It's not one of those things that you'll never find out.
Yeah. Steven, what were your thoughts?
I said we can pull out Noah.
Oh yeah. We had one person who thought that there was going to be this grand scheme with Noah. Who,
Steven.
yeah, it was Steven who thought. Yeah. Oh yeah, Steven did make a Noah prediction.
He's a Noah fan.
I will say, can I go to something else? Is I know fans are very interested. Who was the person driving the truck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had that question, actually. We did have that question.
I'm happy to say it's just driver of truck. That's it.
Okay.
Just some dude driving the truck.
That's what it said in the script, driver of truck?
Yeah, just a driver gets out. So
Okay.
there's
I
no
was
big
really
secret.
curious about
There's no
that,
big
too.
secret there. Yeah.
DOT, driver of
It's
truck.
funny how people latch onto that. You know, it was just.
I think it was just because it seemed like such an epic person because they had to go into the line of battle and like run away.
I think the governor's thinking this person's dead. So
yeah, that's very his character.
He probably just calls him driver.
Yes. That's what it is.
But speaking of the governor and drivers, let's move on to the governor driving and chasing after. Yeah, what a segue. Thank you. Driving after Andrea, who keeps on spotting him and hiding away. And we get once again, and I always like this when it's brought back to the walkers being a real threat, where her first time ducking away, she's not even thinking about the walkers in that moment. And you get that reminder that really they are a threat and they are still there as they first grab her through the trees. And Andrea proves how big of a badass she is and breaks them away. But I always like that reminder whenever you guys bring that in, that this is a world full of walkers. And despite the dispute going on between the prison and Woodbury, that is still an element there.
Yeah, and we have to be careful because we have to show our characters are capable. They know how to dispatch these walkers, but they're all over the place. So the fact that she's left, Woodbury, she's not yet at the prison. She's on the road. It's a free for all. She's by herself, and part of one of the themes of this season is that nobody can exist by themselves. Okay, like whenever people are together and then a bond is broken, they end up sort of looping around and then connected with somebody else.
Or the hitchhiker.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah,
nobody can live by themselves. So in a way, she's in danger until she has to. The bond with Woodbury is broken now. She needs to reconnect that bond with Michonne, that bond with the prison, and that's what she's trying to do. But while she's by herself, she's in danger.
And can I say, very badass? She killed 4 zombies in that scene.
Yeah, well, we've seen her do it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was also the scene where last week where she just kind of sighed. It was like, all right, I'll take care of the walkers if you guys aren't going to do it.
That's how she is, yeah.
Yeah. So we get her in the worst possible situation to be spotted, which is the middle of an open field. Yep. Don't want to be there. But she manages to get away, and she manages to sneak into the trees, and she makes her way to an abandoned warehouse where we get this awesome horror moment, and you really set up an entire, as we were all kind of discussing it after we watched the show, this really cool, intense horror scene and just horror episode, and a lot of horror elements, really utilizing sound, visuals. The governor at one point breaks glass to kind of allow to hear people walking. I believe that was his intention, so you could hear he could hear Andrea walking across. And I thought that was ingenious too, but just a really cool use of sound throughout the episode and sound design.
Yeah.
And then he kept whistling something, and I was wondering if you guys told him what song to whistle, or if that was a choice.
That is "Bye Bye Baby Bunting," which is the song that
he sang
would
to
listen.
Penny?
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
same song. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very diehard moment too, breaking the glass. I almost wish he was barefoot because it was a very, very diehard moment. I felt.
Well, that sequence was actually written by Song Kim, who wrote "Killer Within."
Yeah.
And you know, he was there. He was the writer on set for this episode, and the episode was directed by Stefan Schwartz, who is a great director out of Britain that I've worked with on Crash. We did a number of episodes there. And Song is one of my favorite writers. I've hired him on the last 3 shows I've done. Okay, so he's just great. And so he went, and I said, yeah, we need a warehouse. You know, we were talking about it. So he went, and when they picked that location, he went through and said, okay, she comes in here, da-da-da. And he wrote it to that location. And then he called and said, you know, there's glass. If you notice, when we first see the glass, the governor's breath is on the glass. Before, I don't know if you caught that, but I always love that shot. And then they really kind of mapped it out and shot it over at least a day, maybe 2 days, I forget. And so he really did a great job with that. And the thought behind it was, at first David said, you know, I'm not sure if I get the scene. And I said, it's Night of the Hunter. And he goes, oh, that's one of my favorite movies. I get it. And that was it. That's all we talked about for that. I didn't prep him at all. I just said, Night of the Hunter. He said, got it. And it was on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I'm curious about this because we saw a lot of it in Clear a couple episodes ago, but seeing writings on the wall, like there was one point where it said, wake up, and then at the end when she escapes, right behind her, it just said, ha ha. I was thinking like Simpsons.
I think it is Simpsons, yes. Gimple started that, and he has written Simpsons comics, and he's very, and I'm a Simpsons nut too. But he's very into text on the background. He writes all those signs.
Did he write in Morgan's apartment?
Yeah. In fact, I think he walked into the set and wanted more stuff on the wall or something. And but most of that stuff was in the script. A lot of that stuff was in the script. So with this, that wasn't in the script. So I think just production design was just happy to do it.
Yeah. I think it added a bit of an ironic twist to the moment too, where it's just like she got away, she had her moment.
Yeah, it stuck out a lot. Most of the time, I haven't really. Hadn't really paid too much attention to it, but it really hit me tonight watching it with you guys.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, look at that. I wish I had erased that.
So we got actually. I like this question from the chat, even though it relates to last week's episode. Since you were talking about last week's episode and everything, I'd love to hear your perspective. Walking Dead Army asks, what exactly did Morgan mean by he needed to be clear? And we were debating this last week and all the implications of the word clear. And I'm curious, and Walking Dead Army on the chat is curious what you have to say about that.
Well, what's...
Or that was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but what's the question? It just means that he feels like it's clear as either that somebody's infected, they're bitten, they're about to turn, or that the area itself is not secure. You know,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty straightforward. What was your
Well, I think we were
interpretation?
talking about deeper interpretations with it, like clear as a psychological element.
It's a word that just has so many different connotations, and I remember I said I felt like this was an episode that Rick's mind finally got cleared, in a way, from the beginning to the end, and they were just I felt like Morgan. I also felt like Morgan said clear twice, and it felt like there was different meanings to it, like very, I don't want to say contradictory, but they felt not complimentary, if that makes any sense. But it was 2 weeks ago, so I'm not as fresh as it was on
I'd have to go back and take a look at that. I think that, you know, the point of that, when we were talking about that, is I was saying, you know, Morgan's the ghost of Christmas future. You know, he's the Omega Man. He's where Rick's going to be if Rick doesn't get his act together. You know what I mean? So I think it was just, I'd have to think of exactly what the lines were and how they were used differently, but... you may be right.
I wonder if it's also just a case of sometimes people just trying to dig into things that don't actually exist, which I think sometimes people do that.
That's something that, you know, I mean, Scott's a terrific writer, so he probably, did put that in. I would not think that that's accidental.
Yeah.
I'm just not recalling the actual
I know
line.
one of the lines he said, I think, was, "You don't clear, you just churn, and then you die." And then there was, so I think that was a line that stuck with some people. I think that was one of the confusing. That was during the fight scene that they had when Morgan woke up.
Right.
When woke up. Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and just think about it. I mean,
okay.
if it's not hitting me, I think it might be something that people are just reading a lot into.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
Very
again,
possible.
it could be open to interpretation, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was just kind of,
All right. Well, let's jump back into I guess the horror scene, which again I loved, but we get Andrea escaping and finally getting that breath of fresh air as she sees the prison. And I also thought it was kind of funny that this great breath of fresh air for the audience too. You see a walker walking past, which I thought was kind of funny too, because it's really like that is the breath of fresh air you're getting, is this crappy rundown prison with a walker walking through. But it is, and she sees Rick and starts to waving out to him, and you think she's in the clear. There's that word again. You think she's in the clear.
Did we really? I don't know. For me watching, I was thinking the governor definitely survived that. There's no way he's gonna show up.
I felt a heartbeat before. I felt like something was going to happen too.
I did not think
it was a great setup though, because for a second your defenses are down, and then next thing you know that.
I think that drove me more into it, because you're supposed to think she's okay, and you're just waiting for what's it going to be and how is it going to go down.
I definitely, I was kind of thrown off by it. I thought the governor would survive. I didn't think that was his final moment, but I didn't necessarily think that was going to be the moment where all of a sudden she was captured, was right when she saw the prison. So I actually did get caught by surprise there. So
well, good. You were supposed to. We're cueing the music. I mean, it's supposed to be, it's heartstrings, and she sees the prison, and she's finally made it home. And what I wanted was, to kind of break the audience's heart. Like, she's so close. She's just a second away, and he's just, bam, he just gets her, and the idea that, yes, the walker, she can get through the walker. She can get to Rick. But the idea that this evil man has now got her, you're just so close. Sort of. I think we talked about it as sort of like someone shipwrecked, and the plane is just, they're waving and waving, and then the plane is just going out of sight, or the boat is just going out of sight. You know that they're still trapped.
Oh yeah,
it was supposed to feel like that.
Can I just say too, just between last week, the side of the governor we saw, I just felt was so. I mean, we were discussing a lot about the governor's words and how manipulative he was, and going even back to his canon. I asked you earlier during the episode if you guys followed. I know you follow the comic books up to a point and you do your own thing, but if you actually use Rise of the Governor as canon, you said you don't.
No, I have not read the novels.
Yeah.
David has.
Okay.
But I hadn't.
But I felt like, just felt like maybe he was just being super extra manipulative based on what I know from that book. And so I saw a side of him that was very intellectually cunning. And then just to see this episode, that whole sequence leading up to that, just a horror movie, pretty much. A horror movie sequence, Night of the Hunter, like you said.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, he's now, once you make the choice to install 2 chains in your workshop so that you can capture somebody and rape them with a speculum, that's pretty evil.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what I'm saying? So it's like
You can't go back from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's not like, I'm thinking about doing this. I mean, he's made up his mind. He's going to torture Michonne, so he's pretty evil. He's right, just as we're getting toward the end of the season, he's right in a zone where, the governor is in the comic book when you meet him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we've taken a season to develop that character, but now I think you're more invested in the character. I think you get it.
Oh, yeah.
I think people are in one way, I love that character, and in one way, you kind of want to see him win, but you can't want that because you're going to destroy the show. So it's interesting.
No, I agree. For even reading the comics, I remember when Penny died, and I told David Morrissey on the red carpet, I go, I hated your character in the comics, obviously, but I felt so bad for you on the show, and I wanted to just go, no, he's bad. I know he's bad, but he does such a great job, even for somebody who knows how evil his character was based on, loosely based on.
Yeah, well, he was, David was an actor. He's a fan of the show, okay, before he signed on, and he came in and he read. Okay, which was interesting because he's a big actor in Britain and stuff. So for him to come in and read was really interesting, So he really wanted this. And then we had a number of conversations. He and I would go and grab a meal and stuff. And the scene that I pitched him that I think really intrigued him, and again, we hadn't started working with the writers, or maybe we had, I forget, but the idea that I had was the Maggie interrogation. Okay, that Maggie interrogation that he realizes he could rape her, but it's not going to get him the information, so he says, okay, I need another tactic. The idea that he's cunning and figuring out and playing all the angles, that's the character he wanted to play. He didn't want to just play a sadist. So we had a lot of conversations about that. And if you look at our camera operators, this one guy, Mike Satrazimas, who really is kind of the voice of the show, the way he shoots the show and captures it and stuff, he does a great job. He says, watch everything that David's doing. He just watches through the eyepiece, and he's like, this guy is arcing out everything from the first time we see him. I mean, David gave a tremendous amount of preparation into this role. It's really impressive.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to see. Like a true testament to a good actor.
Yeah,
I think
he's brilliant.
I do want to jump back onto to the whole Rick scene real quick, but it's funny. Some people in the chat are talking about how this whole scene has ruined Doctor Who for them, which is pretty funny.
You can't ruin Doctor Who.
So I think that's worth mentioning. At least the David Morrissey Doctor Who's.
Right.
I think that's definitely worth mentioning. But some also Rick Ship screamed out the one time we need Rick to see something.
That's right.
Which I think is funny too, because he's been seeing things. So
It's all set up. That's right. I mean,
because he thinks he's just having another moment.
That's exactly what Andy even tilts his head and stuff, but it's all set up. He thought he was fine.
Yeah.
Right? Because he didn't see anything last week, and then he's like, I'm seeing stuff. Yeah.
That's why you needed Lori to kind of go there and be, hey, over here.
Yeah. So we get after this, we get the governor coming back and lying to everybody about having Andrea. And I definitely, that was one thing where it's like, he has Andrea. Right. Oh, God. Right. She's going to be that was when I knew she's going to be in the torture chair. But before we get to that, we should mention Tyrese's group talking with the governor and him trying to figure out who lit the pit on fire. And Tyrese's group, at least not seeming to understand the gasoline thing, but I think Tyrese saying that he still wants to stay, I think that was just him saying it and having a good poker face there.
Yeah, well, I think he's trying to think reasonably. I just think he's still at a point where he's still trying to figure people out. I don't think he hasn't seen the governor do anything wrong yet. He's just getting to listen to his story. So I think he still has a ways to go before he figures the governor out. That's just my 2 cents.
And even though him with Alan and Ben, they have their differences, it's still, they are paired together, and I think he realizes how important it is to Ben and Alan, and also to Sasha, but most of the Ben and Alan, to stay there. And if he starts speaking out against them, that whole group has to go. So I think that's also his little part of watching out towards the group again. Especially, he said, I saw red and I don't want to see that anymore. I think he's also trying to redeem himself from holding his friend over a pit of zombies.
Well, earlier...
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, great.
Oh, there. All right, Kristin is
Gold
right.
star.
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah.
All right. Now I feel like the loser now. I lost that.
Hey, he feels bad. He feels bad. You're not supposed to hold somebody over a pit of zombies, and he feels bad.
In this world, anything goes.
Yeah, not for that.
No, it's good to have a character still like that who is collected, who is still on that level. But we end the scene or the episode with that horrifying scene of Andrea in the chair, and you just know what's to come, or I think what's to come. I mean, it's just, oh no. I mean, I thought that was gonna happen to Michonne not a good moment.
Who knows? There's a chair and there's a couple.
Yeah, I'm just glad she's on the chair and not on that other
I
section.
actually thought that she was going to be on the other section, just to kind of even take that deeper, because to go, I don't want to say it sounds so bad, but to go from them being romantically together to them not being romantically together at all. So I thought maybe that was going to be something, but that is a little too dark, I think, for AMC.
No.
Maybe later.
I really.
I was sitting there, I'm like, that would be scarier, but I don't want it to happen. I don't know.
When the torture scene didn't come at the beginning of this season, because in the comics it was a very crucial initial scene, I thought, like, okay, I guess they're not going to go there. That's too much. And now I'm like, oh, God, maybe they are going there. Yeah. So I was actually kind of surprised to see all that equipment, but it's gonna, I'm sure, lead to something so crazy.
And what's great is just like I said, the reaction I had when I first saw that. It's just like, wow, your mind just goes. You've done such a great job with the imagery, just setting off these thoughts. I can only imagine that people who haven't read the comic book aren't seeing that same shot that I am. They could probably assume what we're talking about just from seeing it, though, because there's so much in that shot, and in that torture chair too. I mean, everyone's seen horror movies where Saw, for example, has had stuff like that where you could just only imagine what kind of, or Hostel, where you can imagine what kind of stuff happens. So, yeah, just amazing.
Well, thanks.
I don't know what to say. Well, I mean, I'm excited for the next episode. I'm really excited to see what happens. But before we get to predictions or anything like that, we do have Glen Mazzara here. We do have you here, which is exciting. And I'd love to ask you about just general questions for the season and what it's like to be a showrunner. And I think my initial question for you, and people from the chat, if you have questions, please let us know. What was that initial handoff like from season 2? And I'm curious how much of season 2 you had a hand in compared to the initial showrunner, because it did trade places in the middle of the season.
Yeah, it's it's really tricky. So, and I've talked about this a lot, so I'll just kind of give a quick answer. But I signed on to be Frank Darabont's number 2. Okay, I wrote Wildfire in the first episode, first season. And I had a great time doing that, and loved working with Frank, and he liked my sensibility, and I could see that he wanted to, he was trying to figure out the show, and how to run the show. I mean, this is a really big machine. Okay, this is a really tough show to run. As they all are, but every showrunner thinks theirs is the toughest. So I could offer him some support since I had been a showrunner on some other shows. So he asked me to come on and be his number 2, and then things didn't work out. I don't want to get into that, but he ended up leaving the show. So I was involved in developing the scripts for the first part of season 2. Okay. I was in the writer's room. I helped staff that staff and everything, and we broke and wrote those episodes. There was some of the footage needed to be cut. That's on the DVD package. You could see that stuff that was cut. And when I became showrunner, I cut what was the first 2 episodes together. Yeah. Okay. So episode 1 and 2 were then cut together into the 90-minute premiere, and I would just sort of tweak some stuff. I guess around episode 5, I had to start inserting scenes or doing polishes on the script. The first script that Frank had never polished or rewrote was pretty much dead already. So that was and then after that, we didn't have any scripts in the pipeline. So that's when I was really breaking the stories and not just saying, okay, this is what we're doing, but based on something that Frank had left us, but sort of saying, okay, this is what this episode needs to be. So where the line ends, it's not a clear, point. You can't say, you know what I'm saying? But the what was important was when I took over, one, I didn't ever say, I'm going to try to be like Frank Darabont. I wasn't going to try to mimic his voice. I didn't think that was fair to either one of us. Yeah. 2 is I wanted to go back to the horror roots of the pilot. If you think about it, I think part of it was interesting because when Clear came out, a lot of people thought that was the best episode since the pilot. What's interesting is the pilot, I find, is not really the pilot for the show. because the pilot is really just the Omega Man. It's Rick wakes up and he meets Morgan and Dwayne, and that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, there's nobody else in that episode. I think there's a cutaway to people around the walkie-talkie. The rest of the show is about the people around the camp reuniting with the family, you know, and it becomes a soap, you know. So Clear is kind of episode 2, let's say, coming off the pilot,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you could see how the pilot was slow-paced, had a lot of horror in it, and that's what I've been trying to do since I'm a showrunner, of going back to the horror roots of the show. You can see it in tonight's episode.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and what I try to do every week is say, okay, what's another type of horror that we could do that hasn't been done? So, you know, so this kind of feels like Night of the Hunter or Cape Fear with zombies. That hasn't been done before. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes we'll crib a Western, sometimes we'll crib something else, or draw inspiration from it. So, you know, everybody was incredibly supportive. Everybody really wanted me to, you know, step in and do the show, and the actors and the producers, everybody was very, very supportive in season 2. Yeah.
Great. I guess from the chat we have a lot of questions, and I mean, you guys definitely chime in too. But I think this is something we were talking about before. You kind of love every episode like your baby, but Wild Child for Life wants to know, what would you say is your favorite episode to work on this season, if you could choose one?
My favorite episode to work on this season was probably episode 1, because I carried that around in my head for a long time, and then I just wrote Fade In, and I just wrote it straight through in a notebook, and when it came out, a lot of people were like, okay, this is just a video game, because all of those kills in the courtyard are scripted.
Yeah.
So it looks cool, but it kind of reads pretty boring. It just reads, Rick runs up, hits a walker in the head with a, you know, Daryl rushes behind him, shoots another one, blasts it off its feet, that kind of stuff. So it's not a particularly thrilling script to read, but I saw it and I knew that was going to be fun. So then, and part of it was I went to the set, and I really spent a lot of time on the set, and I said, okay, if I was taking over this prison, where would I come in? What would I do? What would be the best angle, you know, for the audience to meet the prison? And we sort of scripted, okay, they would cut in, they would cut the fence here, they would run in, they would end up running around. All of that was staged. We put a lot of care into actually figuring out ahead of time before we write it. And then it just came together. It was just so much fun. And we, for example, we didn't know how many walkers to have in the field. And while I was there in Georgia, Nicotero was having zombie school. So he said, well, let's take the zombies out of the classroom and put them in the field and see how many we need. So then he just started screaming out, bam, bam, and the zombies would drop, and we just started playing the scene, you know, with Ernest was there and stuff, who directed it. And it just all came together. And it was just really just a lot of fun about the filmmaking. And there was a lot of joy that I had in that particular episode, because it was just brand new, and it was just great to shoot that set, and all the actors were so excited that they had skipped the winter, and that they were shooting the first scene and there were no words. It was just a lot of fun to make that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure also being the first episode back on, like you were saying, it's just like back in the groove. We're back at this.
Yeah, and if I could just say, so what happens is, I then brought that, I forget what we were shooting, but we rented a bar in the town of Sonoy that we use for Woodbury. Okay, we rented this bar, we set up some TVs, and I brought the first episode that was completely done with the music and the sound design, and the, you know, Bear McCreary does a great job with the score and the special effects by Stargate and all of that. So I brought it, and nobody knows what the show is. Nobody has seen the show. The cast and crew haven't seen the finished product. So they were watching it, and I got up, I gave a little speech, and then they were just cheering throughout, and they were just like, so happy with wardrobe, so happy with props, like everybody was congratulating. And I realized that as a showrunner, I am the one person involved in The Walking Dead who sees every single person do their job. I get to see the writers come up with great ideas. I get to see them pitch that to the rest of us, and then to, and go write it, and the producers weigh in, and the executives, and then the actors get in, go, what the fuck is? Oh, sorry, what is this? and all of that, and then the directors, and then it goes to post, and it all ends up in this Warner Brothers Studios where Jerry Ross, our sound guy with his team, and they come in and they're like, we love this one. This one's great. And it's so exciting. And I get to see every part of the process. It's really been a gift. It's been great.
So how much sleep do you get when you're doing that?
Let me say this particular script, okay, I did a draft of this script. I wrote from, think about this, I wrote from 9:30 a.m., like on a Tuesday, to 5:30 a.m. Wednesday.
Wow.
I didn't sleep at all. Maybe had a meal or two or whatever, and just wrote straight through. We needed that script, so I can go on 3-4 hours of sleep, maybe 5, but and I'll do that for
Wow.
8 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I know Darabont was coming from movies to do this TV show, and you've had experience with TV. But I was wondering, like, what was the biggest challenge or lesson coming from shows like The Shield, or Shield in particular, to doing something like this? What's the biggest takeaway you've gotten from this season, or from the show in general?
What I've learned from doing this show that has changed me moving forward.
Moving forward, yeah.
Well, couple things. That's a great question. I've never been asked that. A couple things. One is I think I've become a better filmmaker. I think I've calmed down. I've learned that how you pace things out. I mean, that sequence. Okay, it's basically she's running through a warehouse. I don't know how long it might be, 8 minutes or something. So just kind of having the audience lean in and take your time and let things play out in suspense. That's something I learned from Darabont. Okay, that's something I definitely watched that pilot, learned how he makes films. I think he's a world-class filmmaker, and that's something. And I really paid a lot of attention. If you look at some of the episodes at the end of season 2, I really pushed the filmmaking, because when I came in, people thought, oh, he's the TV guy. He's going to make it a cruddy TV show. It's going to look very tight, and I really was hurt by that. To be honest, I really felt like, oh, I'm the TV guy. Well, I think The Shield's a pretty good show,
Yeah.
But I had a lot to prove as a filmmaker, because I was trying to follow the great Frank Darabont.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've spent a lot of time trying to push that. I think I've gotten good in editing, and learning how to use special effects and sound, and paying a lot of attention, and just taking my time with that craft. So that's been one thing. 2 is, I think, it's just sort of taking time. A lot of people talked about the first half of this season, about the pacing. But that it was more intense, and then it slows down now. Well, I see this as a movie in 16 parts. So any movie is going to be sort of, action-packed or whatever, and then you kind of slow things down before you amp it up. You can see we're amping it up right here. So it's not like if we have a slow episode, oh, the whole show is always going to be boring. I'm just trying to bring it down, because I see it. I think the whole season should be watched in one sitting, believe it or not, because in my mind it plays in one sitting, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I've been, I guess, I've given a long-winded answer too. I hope at the end of this season, whatever I go on and I do next, I can get close to this level of filmmaking, because if you look at what we did in this episode in particular, I really drew inspiration from a lot of films and paid a lot of attention to that.
Wow.
Well, and what you're doing next, congratulations, too, on the new gig.
Oh, well, thank you.
Is there anything new that you can tell us about what you'll be doing next with it?
I can't say that until the ink is dry on a couple of contracts. But I will say I've sold a show that'll be announced soon, and
that'll be on FX.
What's that?
And that'll be on FX.
I don't want to say it.
Okay,
sorry. And I'm looking to do a film that I think would be interesting. That would be based on something that people. It's kind of a famous title, and some other things. I'm also working with a writer, and sort of one of the things I could do is that if a writer is developing their own show, I would help produce and guide that process. So it wouldn't just be me as the creator, but also me as a producer for helping other creators. So there's a couple things coming.
Is there any TV show you're a fan of right now? I mean, being a showrunner, I'm guessing you kind of try and keep a little current.
Listen, Vince Gilligan's a genius, and Breaking Bad, I think, is the best show on TV. I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. I'm dying to see what they're going to do. That's on the 31st. I think they're up against us.
I cannot wait.
Yeah.
Oh, it's only
wow.
well, it's
It's
this your
close.
last episode on their first, so that's the only day. I know because I actually host Game of Thrones for.
Yeah.
So
Well, you know what
I
happens.
should host it.
Yeah, exactly. You know what goes on with Walking Dead.
You
It's
know,
okay.
listen, I love Girls. Love Louie. I love a lot of the FX stuff. Archer is great.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff being done now.
So on the chat, we've got the Walking Dead Army wants you to know that the Walking Dead Army loves you.
Thank
so,
you, Walking Dead Army.
that's
great.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you, and it might be a kind of bad subject, and maybe it's not bad blood, but there were creative differences supposedly, which is why you left the show. And I'm excited for your new gigs, which Kristin was bringing up, and it seems like actually things have really picked up and are more exciting for you now. But what were some of those creative differences, if you could go into it?
Well, it's funny you say that. You know, you have to think that there's a new team coming in and stuff, and that new team, you know, needs to find their way. So I don't want to. So I don't want to put anything out there that then prejudices how people look at other material, or what, you know what I'm saying. So I'll just say it was not one specific thing. It wasn't like I wanted to do this and other people that, you know, AMC didn't want to do that, and it was that. It was a cumulative effect of a lot of different tonal choices, character choices, that kind of stuff. We were, you know, if we it would have. We just weren't on the same page, and there were enough differences. And trust me, listen, the show's successful. You want to try to work this material out. You know what I'm saying? And we just couldn't. So it was like, you know, this. I've said this before. You know, it's. I've been very lucky. Okay, that I you know, got to work with Frank Darabont. I got to work with a lot of talented people on the show. I got in. You know, and when I became showrunner, I just didn't want to be the guy who screwed this up. I knew that this show meant a lot to people, and I didn't want to be that guy. And then luckily I got in the zone, and I really kind of loved it. You know what I'm saying? But it's not my show. I didn't create the show. You know, Frank created the show. So if you know, there's no hard feelings. I mean, people, you know, it's kind of like, okay, I've done my job.
Yeah.
You know, I think I've delivered, hopefully.
Well, season 3 has been the most successful, so.
So, you know, and let you know, other people take it from here or whatever, and I'll go out with the season, and then I'll move on and do something else. So,
I feel it's an understatement that you said you delivered. You've done more than delivered. and also, I mean, you seem to speak really well of Scott Gimple since he's written Clear and
well,
a
I
few
brought
of the
Scott
other ones
onto
too.
the show. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, Scott worked on Life. I did Life the first season, and you know, and he did it the second season, so I had never met him. But, you know, I saw his name, he was available. Okay, there were a lot of writers available. And so I reached out to some of the people who were on staff both seasons, who worked with both of us, and they said, well, you know, the guy's brilliant. You know, you should meet with him, you'll love him. So he and I had a meal, and you know, he's a very interesting guy and has a lot of great thoughts about TV and stuff. So, you know, it was, you know, when he had some terrific samples. So I brought him into Frank. You know, I said, let's, you know, I was the one who was kind of setting up the writers who was going to come in and meet Frank. You know, I was kind of saying, I back this writer. I sent forward Scott's samples. I wrote a cover letter saying I really believe in this writer and thinks, you know, he can contribute in a significant way. Frank agreed, and then, you know, and you know, fortunately, we were both right. I mean, so you know, I think the show's in good hands, in Scott's hand.
Very capable hands.
He wrote Clear, so I mean, you know, look, you know, he and I wrote the 18 Miles Out, you know, and Scott's just a huge part of the show. So fans should not worry about the show moving forward.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And
thank you.
I do want to move on to comments real quick from our iTunes and YouTube so we can get to those. Thank you guys, everyone, for your comments. We only have so much time to address all of that, but thank you so much, Glenn.
Okay, thank you. Are you booting me out? Or you
No, we're not booting you out. It's just I want to address some comments from our iTunes and all that before we get to some predictions. So from iTunes, thank you guys so much for commenting. Spotless12, Montrez, Mama Jamma, and Lamar. I love that name. And Mikael. Mikael theorizes the reason why the governor knew about Rick and crew gathering more ammunition for the war is because the governor's taking Morgan hostage. I don't think so, but that was something that people were wondering about was how the governor knew that that Rick had all this ammunition. And I think people were speculating maybe it was Andrea telling him.
I just think it's just he can have a look at it. We could see that he could actually be on the edge of the prison, and Rick still won't see him. So I think it's safe to say it's easy to have a lookout around there. So
Yeah.
That sounds great.
At least somebody was looking out this episode.
On YouTube, we have Worship Creative, the Dame 3245, Charlotte Sophia SF, Duquesne Fan 1, Jackhammer 23, Charm P 321, Max 36, July Wino, JJW 48002. The Dame 3245 asked, how do you see things going down after the war? And I know, Glenn, you can't answer any of these, but this is for us. How do you see things going down after the war? Do you think any of the Woodbury crew will be joining the prison crew, or just Tyreese and Andrea? I don't know about Andrea at the moment, but I don't think we're going to see any Woodbury crew, and I think that everyone's going to be outside of the prison next season. I think that this season's going to wrap up the prison.
Yeah,
How do you guys feel?
kind of agree with that. Yeah, we don't know exactly what's going to happen to Andrea, and you know, this is new ground even with if Tyreese joins in. It would be nice to see Milton or Martinez would be a really interesting addition if he somehow went over to the prison.
I don't think we're going to see either of them.
I don't
really.
think so, but I really think it's going to be very separate. You know, when you have so many characters, you just can't sustain them, or else it's just a group shot, a lot of group scenes. So we're gonna see. I think we're gonna see a lot of those guys disappear.
I just think it'll be interesting to see who eventually, because I would imagine the governor has to go at some point, who takes his place, because you do have everybody at Woodbury unless there's a mass destruction of Woodbury, but otherwise somebody else has to rise up and take over.
Yeah. We had Jackhammer 23 asking, or not understanding, because we were talking about our prediction of who's going to die and who's not, and other people were commenting, and Jackhammer doesn't understand why so many people want Beth to die and disagrees, thinking that she won't die. I don't think anybody wants her to die. I kind of thought that she would end up dying to build onto Carole's story arc, and once again, I mean, he already had to deal with Sophia, but I think that's kind of why I was thinking that.
Well, I think people also think Beth because she's not as big as either a part of the show or a character favorite, where you go around, you go, well, you can't kill off Rick right now because there's nobody to really take his place at the moment yet. There could be, and that would be quite a surprise if they did. But, you know, Daryl, it would be kind of silly to take off Norman Reedus, who is such a huge fan favorite. I think you'd have a lot of people up in arms. I'm not talking personally for myself, but I think there would be a lot of. You go through the list of like, okay, who is kind of expendable at this point? So you have a couple, and you go, well, that's kind of an easy choice because we all like her, and it would be really sad if she, you know, died. But
you know who would be sad if they died, Kristin? Daryl.
I think correct me if I'm wrong, fans out there, but I would imagine a lot of people would not be happy if Daryl died right now.
I think the fans are, you know, if the fans can save anybody right now, I think Daryl's the big favorite.
Yeah.
But one thing
you could see Rick going before Daryl, I think.
I don't know about that. That's a little too much. But one thing I always think is funny is that Melissa McCarthy's been in every single episode or been in since the first season, and yet she's never Melissa McCarthy's never in the opening credits. She's always also starring, and people in the opening credits died. McBride.
Melissa McCarthy. Identity Thief?
Oh, Melissa.
No.
Yeah.
McBride. Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Sorry. Not the country singer.
Melissa McBride, who is supposed to call in next Sunday.
Yeah,
we tease that?
You can tease that.
Yeah, we can tease that.
Fantastic. She's fantastic.
So
She's wonderful. She wanted to come in, but she's in Atlanta right now, so she's going to try to call in.
So talented.
So fans of Melissa McBride, definitely check out next week. We'll have her calling in, and you can ask her questions. Adrian, aka Watchtower from the chat, chimed in, if Daryl dies, we riot.
I know.
There you
I
go.
heard it. I hear it. I get it.
All right, so finally from we got an email from SSH4L giving us a prediction, and I'm kind of condensing here, that SSH4L thinks the governor will end up using Andrea as leverage to try and infiltrate the prison. And this was based off of last week's episode. We didn't know what was going to happen this week. When this doesn't work, the governor will kill Andrea and Tyreese will end up living another day. What do we think? And actually, that does kind of apply now that he has Andrea. I don't know if he'll necessarily use her as leverage. I think at this point he can still surprise the prison, and he's going to try and use that element of surprise.
I think they could. It was funny when I read that. I really thought that was a good idea to use her in place of how they used Tyreese,
right.
and really get to the prison group that way. I mean, that would be powerful. And right now she's in a state where she can't really fight him, so it'd be quite. He already transported her in a car. It would be quite an element of surprise if he drives up and uses her against.
Yeah.
Well, some of these predictions too are also based on information that people know from another source, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to compensate for something that happens in the comic book. But so I think it's interesting, but I can't see that happening personally. But you never know, because I don't think I would have predicted what happened at the end of this episode either. So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, actually, I guess that maybe he won't torture her and could end up doing that. But I guess that kind of wraps up the comments from you guys. Let's get to some predictions.
Well, I want to ask a real quick question.
What? Yeah, go ahead.
So it's been a long-standing little fun thing this season that we've had Vincent Ward on, we've had Lou Temple on, and they always die the episode that they're here. So I got to ask, do the writers watch AfterBuzz and decide there? And if so, having an executive producer on the show, how many main characters are they just going to kill off next episode because of that?
Well, you'll have to find out.
Yeah, every character that you had a deep hand into creating and fleshing out apparently is going to die next week based on what's
our
happened.
past.
And because we have Melissa on next week, or
Although
phoning
she's
in.
not in studio, so maybe she'll just break a leg or something.
Yeah, but apparently that means the final episode she'll die.
If she does, that would be 3 for 3. Wow.
Well, this season, yeah, we also had from season 1 Juan on, and he was from season 1, so we didn't have to worry about him. But yeah, we were joking that maybe we shouldn't have Daryl on and try and get Norman Reedus on just for Kristin's sake, because we don't want to see his character die off.
That's our excuse when we don't get Norman Reedus.
Yeah.
We don't want to kill him. That's
Yeah.
it. There you go.
All right, but let's get to some predictions.
And now, your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
Oh, you're all looking at me.
Well, we're looking at each
Well,
other.
we're looking across the table here.
Glenn, predictions. No, I'm just kidding. That would be the best predictions ever. Ooh, I
have mine.
really, I think he's gonna end up, somehow Michonne is gonna find out about Andrea, and I think we'll see her take charge. And I want to see who did I think it's Milton, who lit the pits on fire. But we're not seeing Milton done yet to find the governor. As somebody said, he's grown some balls. I still think he's going to do something big, which could either stop all of this and yet maybe lead to his death, or try to stop all of this and just make things really worse, and it could still lead to his death. So, sorry, apparently I'm predicting that Milton's going to die soon. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, Milton.
Well, two things. First of all, last week I predicted that Sasha will end up dying, and I think she's going to die at the hands of Allen or Ben. And after seeing that scene between Tyreese and Sasha on the top, I just felt it was a very bonding experience, and it just kind of reminded me almost of Axel and Carole before he got the bullet. So I still think Sasha's going to be gone very soon. I'm not sure about Allen or Ben, but if by then, maybe by accident, because I think they care too much about each other. But the thing about Milton, and I have to apologize, somebody tweeted this at me, and unless they deleted it, they tweeted at me before I even saw the episode. They think that, and I'm kind of predicting this too, I agree, they think that Milton and Philip are brothers. And I'm going with that too. I kind of have a feeling that relationship, and it kind of explains a lot.
Wow.
I just want to see your face.
Yeah, we're just
Oh, damn, I should be
hysterical.
looking at you
I'm
on
going to
saying
rewatch this.
Let's
so I
only
can
have
see
the camera on
Glenn's-
Glenn for every reaction.
I
Your poker
apologize.
face is way better than Milton's, by
Yes,
the way.
you're much better than Milton.
I apologize, whoever tweeted at me. I can't find it, otherwise I'd give you a shout out. But just consider yourself shouted out, so because you helped me think that up.
Father Wizard, I just thought this was funny, commented, Beth and Judith are the only survivors of the war. No, I kid. That would be pretty epic. I'm going to keep on going with what I've been predicting the past couple weeks, which is that Merle, I think, is going to have a redeeming moment, and in his redeeming moment, he's going to get killed. And he's going to do something redeeming for the prison. And also based off of what we saw for next week's upcoming episode, where they're kind of having this discussion with Merle of, are you with us or are you not? Who are you with? I think we're going to see that from Merle's character, where he's going to have that peak of his arc where he redeems himself to us to then bite the bullet.
Well, because it's shared with a few people that Michonne is the bargaining chip.
Yeah.
So Rick caves from what we saw in the earlier episode that he wasn't going to tell anybody, but all of a sudden people know. So I'm wondering how that's going to affect the prison. I don't have a prediction for that. I'm just interested to see where it goes.
All right, well, I guess that wraps it up for us, guys. Thank you so much for watching this week. Thank you, Glenn, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And guys, once again, you can find me on Twitter at the Dave Klein, that's Klein, or on my website, djk-online.com.
And you can find me at Nandovel on Twitter. That's Nandovel.
And you can find me on Twitter, Kristin Carole 13.
At Glen Mazzara. Thank you.
That's a really difficult one. And how about Steven? What about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Stephen Lemieux, and I kind of think that at the end we're gonna see, God, I just had his name, nerdy guy. Why can't I?
Milton.
I think we're gonna see kind of a scene with Milton and the governor, where Milton has the ability to save them both, and he lets them both burn in flames in some kind of way.
And real quick, Haley from the chat says thank you, Glenn, and she's a regular follower, so I wanted to give her a shout out.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. See you next week.
From Bing.com, executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.